when the housing market is, doing well and going through the roof, normally it's an indicator that the economy is doing well. This is the very reason why a lot of people are quite confused as to why housing prices are going up right now, because I think everyone is really aware of the fact that actually the economy isn't doing really great. All over the world, people are losing jobs in the hundreds of thousands. And, if you think I am exaggerating, could it be potentially that you are one of the fortunate few who hasn't lost their entire ability to earn income? A lot of businesses haven't been able to trade at all in this period. And all of these people have bills, they pay rent, they have mortgages, all of which need to be met. Now, the government realizes the catastrophic effect if they don't actually intervene. And that's exactly what they've done. They've intervened and they've bolstered the economy. So right now, things might not seem that bad, but underlying, lots of people are losing their jobs. And we're going to jump into the statistics. And when you actually delve into the figures, it is actually really alarming to see where we are. And so I'm going to go into that now. And we're just going to look at where we are, and I'm going to touch on where I think it's going to go, and then finally at the end of the video, the measures I'm going to be taking to prepare myself and my family, and potentially things that you could consider doing to prepare yourself as well. Okay, so this is the Office of National Statistics website. It's a fantastic website and full of facts and data. The numbers never lie. If we just compare with 2008, which is a great starting place, because 2008, we all know, was a big financial crisis moment. Banks went bust. If you had money in the bank, in like Northern Rock, you lost your money. Lots of banks around the world went bust, and that's a good kind of measuring comparative point of when things go horribly wrong, and what the numbers actually look like when things go wrong. So, in 2008, for anyone who's visually impaired, I'm just showing a graph of unemployment rate. So in 2008, we can see that actually unemployment was at 5.2%. So this starts to rise very sharply as we get into 2010, and unemployment was at 8%. I remember actually looking for a job at the time and not being able to find a single place that would hire me. People were actually working for free at this period just to kind of keep their employment record. So in 2011, we kind of see the peak where unemployment is at 8.4%. So this starts to rapidly go down as the economy improves into 2007, 2018, and we can see here about just after 2018 into 2019, unemployment is at a very good 3.8%. But now, as we go into COVID times, COVID regions back into 2020, this graph is starting to rise. Now, you might look at the graph and say, well, unemployment is only at 4.9%, but remember, the bad event actually happened in 2008. It took a few years to see the full impact of what happened in 2008. And actually the worst was in 2011, which is a good 3 years after 2008 to actually see the worst impact of it. So in reality, if we are trying to compare the two, and if we were to say that scenarios are just as bad, we are really only at the beginning. And, again, to bear in mind the fact that a lot of this unemployment is being kept down because the government is actually supporting people to stay employed, because they are very aware of what could go wrong if they just let everything take its natural course. Now, I'm moving on to a graph that actually talks about the level of redundancies. Again, if we compare just after 2008, so that's the worst case scenario. Right now, in 2020, we have already surpassed that number. We are at 13 people made redundant for every 1,000 employed. And this is with the furlough scheme still in place. I mean, I shudder to think what is actually going to happen to these numbers when the furlough scheme stops. And remember, looking at the unemployment graph, the true impact only happens at least 1, 2, 3 years after the real incident. So moving on to GDP. A recession technically is actually 2 quarters of GDP going down. So Q1 we see GDP's gone down, and then it's gone down really, really sharply in Q2. And Q2, as you can see here, is April to June 2020. That's when things were at its worst. The entire globe was in lockdown. No economic activity was really happening except for the businesses that were allowed to operate in this period. And then Q3 is the one that we talked about, the summertime, where there was the feel good feeling, cases were going down around the world, and we thought we were actually coming out of this and the worst had already passed. Now, the Q4 data isn't out yet because it takes them a little time to actually put it together, but that's going to cover October to December. So the next thing I want to show you is what is known as the 18-year property cycle. Now, this is actually a cycle that I first became aware of listening to the Property Hub podcast. If you don't know it, it's a fantastic podcast run by these two guys called Rob, and they discuss the 18-year property cycle. And I think I listened to this about 3 or 4 years ago, and it's a guy called Fred Harrison, and essentially he was an economist, and he discovered that the sale of land and houses and everything actually had a pattern to it, and this pattern almost seemed to follow the cycle precisely of 18 years, going back up to 200 years. I mean, it's unbelievable. 200 years, and this pattern has not missed a beat, except for, barring, major events like wars and things like that. So, we're actually going to look at what the 18-year property cycle roughly looks like and where I think we are in the cycle and what this actually means. So if we look at it now, the 18-year property cycle, if I just draw it really quickly. So in essence, year property cycle essentially says that in the first 7 years you have a rise in property prices, feel good sentiment, everyone's buying, and then you sort of get this little wobble that starts to happen in the last couple of years of the first 7-year period. Prices start to go down, but then after that point, there's a massive rally and there's great sentiment. People buy. And this is when you see property prices really skyrocketing and prices double in places like London. We've seen that over the years. But this is sharply followed by a decline for 4 years. And I believe Rob and Rob actually call this period, the winner's curse. This is when you buy property at its absolute peak. And this is the worst possible thing that you can do, because shortly afterwards you are going to find your property being valued at much less and less, or you might find it just plateauing. Previously you were seeing house prices go up and you thought, well, if I buy, my house is going to go up in value and then I can sell it and it'll be great. But you might find that it's plateauing a bit and not really moving anywhere. This is known as the winner's curse, and this is buying before the dip, and potentially house prices then start to drop quite drastically after that. I mean, the general trend is, property prices over time always tend to go up, so in the long term. But within this 18-year cycle, we see, the peaks and troughs. And I actually think this is where we are in the cycle around this point, because I'm actually taking my calculating point from 2008, and you take your starting point from where you think it is, but I'm using 2008 as my start point. So that kind of, takes us to 2015 at the mid wobble, and the peak at the year 2022. So I actually think we are somewhere here. Now, the danger, of course, is what they call the winner's curse, which is buying within 2 years of the peak. Now, I have to be extremely careful if I'm thinking about moving house or buying property at any point before this peak period. I need to be really careful that I am not overpaying, because if I overpay, I might regret that decision quite badly in years to come. So then I think, property prices will go down afterwards. And, remember, this is my own personal opinion. This is my take on the 18-year property cycle. You have a read through it and take your own view on where you think we are and what you think is coming next. But the reason why I am still confident and happy to buy property is I know that there's been a lot of quantitative easing going on right now. And if you've seen my video on how I've lived through extreme hyperinflation, probably some of the worst hyperinflation in the world, I learned a significant lesson living through that period. And that was when money is being printed, asset prices go up. Hard assets like houses and stocks and shares and all of that sort of thing, their value goes up because it's trying to retain its value in comparison to money that is being worth less and less every day. So this is why I will still be looking to purchase, albeit extremely considerately and extremely carefully in this period. But I do think property prices will not drop in 2021. I actually think they will go up. In some areas, you might see a fall, and in some areas, I think you might actually see some property prices stagnate and not go anywhere. But I think generally, as we come to the end of the year, it might start to improve. I could be wrong. We shall see. But I do think a dip will follow fairly soon in the future as well. This, however, is actually quite different to the economics and, the job market and things like that, which I think is potentially going to be a lot worse in 2021. And our personal finances need to be ready for that. What does this mean for you and me? Generally speaking, I think 2021 is going to be an incredibly tough period economically. When the furlough scheme ends, when the governments can't keep supporting people and giving stimulus checks and checks to people to survive and pay their bills, people are going to have to be able to actually survive on their own, because we are in another lockdown, and as Boris said, it's potentially worse than what it was at the beginning. So we have this new strain. It seems to be catching a lot more. It seems to be more severe than others. I personally know a lot of people who are infected. I know a few who are actually in hospital with this new strain. And for anyone who has family who are suffering and in hospital, my thoughts and my heart goes out to you. So what does this mean for us economically and financially? I think we should all be preparing our finances. If you haven't already been doing that in 2020, you absolutely have to start now. Save your money wherever you can. Keep an emergency fund, keep building it up. Every member of your family contribute to an emergency fund. If you are fortunate enough to still be in employment and not having to travel into work, you count yourself as one of the very lucky few, because not many people in the world have the luxury of that. Save that money. Try not to spend online as much. I know it's tempting. Let's try and get through this. The second thing is obviously consider other ways of earning income. There are some fantastic platforms out there. There's some amazing YouTube channels with ideas on how to make money that isn't just reliant on your job. For the UK, there's Mama Furfur, there's Panda Boss, there's the Humble Penny. There's so many that actually give ideas on how you can earn income. So consider watching those. Consider using that for yourself. I know a lot of people might say, well, that's not really me. I can't really do that. Just give it a go. Try. Because if you lose your job, and fingers crossed that is not the case, but if you lose your job, what will you do? We need to start kind of building these additional options, these additional ways of earning income before we really need them, because it's a lot harder to do when we do actually need them. We have one of the most precious assets right now, which is time. We are in the third lockdown, and if you're one of the fortunate people who doesn't actually physically have to go out to work, you have time, because you don't have the commute anymore. You could wake up those extra couple of hours before work starts in the morning, before you sit at your desk and work from home, to come up with ideas to start working on your side hustle. I don't like calling it a hustle because I feel like the word hustle just sounds stressful, but another way to earn income. And if you look for it, it will start appearing. You just have to be quite intentional about it. And the third one is essentially what we are planning to do as a family. I talked about it in my goals for 2021. I'll link the video here if you want to look at it in more detail. But anyone who's watched it might think it's kind of contradictory that I'm talking about house prices going down, because one of my goals was actually to buy property in 2021. But it's not contradictory, because actually if house prices do fall, that is actually a good time to buy. normally in investing, you make your money when you buy, and it's the same with stocks and shares. When the price goes up, that's great. But if you buy it at a really low price, your profit is even more. And so that is my intention. My deals will work even if prices aren't low, even if they are at, standard market rate. But it's even better if I get them at a lower price. So that's my hope and my intention. Who knows what the year has to bring, but that is one of our goals. And I also talk about alternative things we are going to be trying to earn extra income as well. So check out the video if you're interested in that. But that's it from me, really. My thoughts are out to anyone who might actually be suffering from COVID. I hope you get through it. And also to anyone who might be suffering from job loss, consider the alternative options. I know it's easier said than done, but it's certainly worth a try. And if you are fortunate enough to still actually have a job, save all of those pennies, save that money, because even if the rainy day doesn't come, then you're in a fantastic position, because then it means that we've all actually gotten through this and it's happy days for everyone. So that's it from me today. I'm Babai. I like talking about all things money and mindset. So if you're interested in any of that, please subscribe. Hit the like button if you found anything here useful or informative, and I will see you on my next video. Bye.